I think it's fair to say MMA is definitely not the same sport it used to be. Over the years, there's been a move towards something more organised, professional. Pay-per-view numbers were still great in the 2000s, but cage fighting was also much more of a novelty. Ultimately, these days, if you do want to get noticed, you better stand out.
You see the man just exuding.
Guys like Chael had an act, Conor McGregor trash-talked his way to success, but someone like Michael Chandler just put out good promos. The only other way usually to get fans interested in you is to do it where it counts, in the cage. And there has been a fair few fighters that managed to become superstars without ever even worrying about the promotional side of the business. I'm Bailey, and from MMA On Point, thank you to all the MMA On Point channel supporters, and these are the 10 biggest MMA stars that barely promoted themselves. First off, what are we talking about when we say self-promotion? Well, yeah, trash talk, but that is just an incredibly small part of it.
Well, I'm glad you won this one, because you're not winning the next time I get my hands on you.
Guys like Anderson Silva or GSP never did any of that, but they appeared in television adverts and on TV shows. That's all self-promotion. Some fighters have their own YouTube channels or social media where they put out a lot of content. Again, all examples of self-promotion. Some of the fighters in this video didn't just not promote themselves, but most of them actively avoided the media entirely. Ultimately, even just speaking up about what you want can be enough. John Gooden recently reminded us that the UFC marketing team are often just begging for fighters to say, well, anything they can use to blast them on social medias and promote them.
You're making their job easier if you're creating a lot of buzz.
Or you could go the Charles Radke route and, just say absolutely nothing at all.
You guys get these interviews for free. I need to get paid. Let's go. Up next is... Good. I'm out.
Either way, hopefully that gives you an idea of what today's video is about, so let's count them down. Number 10, Frankie Edgar. As a guy who's labelled himself as the everyday man of MMA, Frankie Edgar came into the UFC and adopted the role of the underdog. I mean, he literally embraced it, knowing he was undersized, and he used that to fuel himself to a UFC title run. But along with that came what he called an old school mentality. This is a guy who was told growing up, the loudest guy in the room isn't the one you want to worry about, it's the quiet ones. And he said that stuck with him. Frankie really did nothing more than focus on training and being the best fighter he could be. And fans grew to love him because he carried that chip on his shoulder into fights where he was outsized but still found a way to win. Frankie was always a respectful guy, but not trash talking and not promoting yourself is not the same thing. Like I said, Michael Chandler cuts a damn good promo, but Frankie has talked about his career and how he feels about that kind of promotion as well.
Most of these people I think they sound stupid a lot of times.
I agree. It doesn't seem natural.
It's like, man, I don't like it.
Don't do it, Frankie.
Yeah. I mean, if someone's going to say something directly to me and dog me, of course I'll respond.
I'm cool with that.
But I'm not going to sit there and, come up with some promo line or something like that. It's just not me, and I feel like people will realize it's phony.
Frankie almost does the opposite. He'll tell you he's not the biggest or strongest or even the fastest guy. It's like anti-promotion, but he's still going to walk out to kick in the door and try and take your soul anyway. I honestly think it's part of his motivation and how he's been able to work so hard in the gym. During his prime, he was never the guy on commercials or calling people out, but even after he lost the title, he was always head down, grinding back to the drawing board, just taking on whoever he was given. Number 9, Johnny Hendricks. It's now been over 10 years since Johnny Hendricks fought GSP for the title, and when he first got to the UFC, a lot of people watched him pretty closely as he was an extremely credentialed wrestler that was TKOing people. Now, if you can also talk like Bo Nickel, that might have gotten more people to pay attention initially, but the truth was, Johnny just didn't. His interviews were already just very matter of fact.
How do you feel after the fight?
I feel good. Like I've been telling everybody, I got to go back into the gym.
Johnny had to go 12-1 in the UFC before he got a title shot. And right when he thought he was going to be booked against GSP, the UFC made the Nick Diaz fight. That's when he told media he started to question if he had to now start calling someone out or say certain things just to get a title shot. But he took a step back even then and said he wasn't going to change who he was just to get his chance.
You got to let your fighting do the talking. Yes, you're trash talking or whatever you can provoke can help you out get something, but I don't want to do that, because I want to make sure that everybody is excited to watch me fight, not because I can run my mouth.
But even when Johnny got the title shot against GSP, in typical Hendricks fashion, the media were reporting in the lead up that he hadn't posted any pictures of himself training, hadn't really got a social media you could follow, and was literally doing nothing to promote the title fight. He didn't win against GSP and then lost the belt to Lawler, and he bounced back with a win against Matt Brown and wanted a title rematch. But instead, the UFC went with Rory McDonald. Hendricks was left out of the loop, and he pretty much said the same thing.
what can I do? You know, there's nothing I can do, nothing I can say that's going to get me back in there. And I'm not going to start changing the way I carry myself to get it.
Johnny was another guy whose wrestling work ethic almost propelled him to stay focused on his training and fighting rather than promoting. And even at the UFC media days, he never really had much to say because most of the time he was busy cutting weight. Number 8, Rory McDonald. There was a hell of a lot of hype around Rory McDonald when he got to the UFC. He was being called one of the first guys who was training in just MMA as a young lad.
His MMA career began at the ripe old age of 14 as he walked into Toshido Fighting Arts in Kelowna with no previous fight training but a willingness to learn.
And he was training with GSP as well, trying to walk in his footsteps. He was even in the same weight class. That message got repeated by the UFC promo, commentators, even media, but once they shot him in the cage, we loved watching the technical efficiency that the Canadian Psycho had. That was enough for us to like him and make him a star. But from day one, it seemed more than anything, Rory was just a martial artist, and that was exactly the way he carried himself. Only with respect for everyone else in the sport, he became obsessed with MMA at school, and he knew he wanted to be a pro fighter. Combine that with his cold, calculated, and definitely introverted demeanor, and you've got an absolute stone-cold killer on your hands, who, just by being violent as hell in the cage and completely neutral outside of it, was enough to turn him into a star. When asked about why he doesn't put himself out to the public, Rory simply said,
"I'm not worried about if I'm more popular than the next guy. I'm just trying to get in there. You know, I don't go to my way to be seen. If I could stay on the down low as much as possible, I'm cool with that."
Still, what he did give us over his career was enough to give him cult star status as one of the most technical proficient guys to ever grace the sport. Number 7, Dan Henderson. Especially these days, there's a few fighters whose interviews or press conferences you just can't miss.
That fucking guy's like, yeah, how about you drive a big lifted truck, your dick's about this big, let's go.
Maybe they're going to talk some trash or pull out some kind of gimmick. Shit, maybe they're just Mike Perry. But one guy you've definitely never said that about is Dan Henderson.
No.
Nothing wrong with Dan, we love Hendo, but he's probably one of the most relaxed and stoic guys in the sport. Going into a cage fight for him seems as simple as going to the pub for a pint.
Bisbing does talk a lot. I guess he was working to get me riled up, and I'm easygoing and I can roll with it. I mean, you know, I just kind of take a mental note.
To be fair, we didn't need Henderson to say anything really, as long as he was knocking people out and involved in complete wars in the cage. I mean, that was literally enough, but it does make it all the sweeter, I guess, when a guy who doesn't trash talk just takes a mental note so he can actually return it where it counts, inside the cage. Dan was, again, never really a guy to go out and do interviews or commercials. He often gave the same answers to different media members during press week, and we got to hear his thoughts on guys like Chael.
Real life. I'm not a martial artist. I am a gangster from Westland, Oregon, and I win fights with these, and I make no goddamn apology.
When he didn't get a title shot after he got injured at 151 and the show was cancelled. The UFC gave Chael the title shot. He wasn't even fighting a light heavyweight and didn't deserve it, but obviously he got it because he self-promoted himself into that position.
You said, I guess I should just quit training to win fights and to be exciting for the fans and just go to shit-talking school, and you addressed that to @Dana White.
You know, I was, I guess, in shock, probably like a lot of everyone else in the MMA world. You know, it just didn't seem right to me.
You are not going to get Dan to cut a sweet promo or start up a YouTube vlog, but you could get him to knock people out though. Number 6, Cain Velasquez. Very, very quickly, Cain rose to the top of the UFC heavyweight division. He basically just ran through everyone, put some epic beatdowns on people, and showed a skill set that no one thought a heavyweight could possess. He was just so impressive to watch, it didn't really matter to fans that, well, he barely promoted himself.
You know, words don't win fights, fights win fights, and that's what I'm here to do, you know, win on Saturday.
First of all, you don't need to say much to know what he's about, especially with the giant tattoo across his chest that basically tells you everything you need to know about the guy. This is someone who doesn't listen to music in the back while warming up, he just gets his mind ready. There isn't a shred of bravado when it comes to Cain Velasquez. When the UFC booked a show in Mexico City for Cain to come back after a 2-year layoff and defend his title, it was a really big deal. The UFC had never done such a big event in Mexico. Velasquez is obviously super proud of his heritage, and you'd think he might have gone over to Mexico and done a bunch of things to promote the show, but it was actually his opponent Fabricio Verdum who went out to Mexico over a month early and not only assimilated to the altitude but spoke Spanish to the fans, media, and actually did a lot to promote the Mexico show before Cain had even arrived in the country. I mean, Verdum basically had the fans eating out the palm of his hand, and maybe for Cain it was just a lot of pressure, but it doesn't change the fact that he didn't really do anything to help promote the show other than just, well, show up. Number 5, Mirko Crocop. Around the time people considered Mirko Crocop one of the deadliest and greatest heavyweights on the planet, he came across as a pretty scary guy.
Ron Waterman is your opponent tonight. Your thoughts on H2O Man?
Just a second. Mike, take the microphone. Mike.
Okay.
Microphone. Did I tell you something?
Yes,
Please,
come here. Yeah, I will. Okay, thank you.
Right
Sorry,
now.
Marshall.
Leave it right now.
I apologize.
Man, this is just a joke.
Oh.
It's fast game. It's my idea.
Were you scared? Of course I was. You were shitting your pants.
Hazing is a fun way to show a new employee that she is not welcome or liked.
Joe Rogan has talked about his stare down with Wanderlei Silva in Pride being one of his favourites, you know, because they both look like they want to kill each other. And Crocop, being from the actual special forces, is trained to do that. And it seemed to him fighting was way beyond a show and entertainment. It was a fucking battle zone.
5, 4.
Safe to say, as a result, he was always a man of few words. He was already a big star when he came over to the UFC, but despite being able to speak English, he never really did anything to promote himself outside of the regular interviews you have to do as a UFC fighter. And he did talk about the UFC experience being completely alien to him.
I just feel like I came to Mars, you know, when I came to UFC.
The media is not my passion, definitely.
Is this the least favorite part of your job?
That's hardest part, believe me. That's hardest part.
I mean, he wasn't bigging himself up and calling people out. Later in his career, he was being quite honest about his current situation.
I had 6 surgeries during my career. You know, I had 4 surgeries for my knee, and I don't think that I will survive another knee surgery. You know, I don't want to go through that anymore. So any fight could be the last one.
Now, all of this isn't that surprising, but he was also at the same time doing a lot of promotion outside of the English-speaking world, despite obviously being able to speak it. None of that ultimately mattered though, because he became a legend in Japan and was already a superstar by the time he got to the US anyway. Number 4, Mark Hunt. Right, so here's another knockout artist again. Looks like a pretty simple pattern here. You know, you knock people out, you can still be a star even if you don't want to or can't even talk to the media. Mark Hunt had a 5-fight win streak in Pride that turned him into a legend, and then a 5-fight losing streak that had everyone counting him out. During that time, I mean, there was no promotion at all, really, especially in front of a non-English speaking country. When Mark came over to the UFC though, it was in front of an English audience and Mark had to do media. I mean, finally, after he just got his first big win, all those losses, had been offered a paycheck to just walk away from his contract, he had the perfect chance to tell his story or just say anything. And Mark, you know, he just wasn't interested.
A lot of people in this world, if their boss offered them a paycheck and said don't show up, they'd be pretty happy with that. And you obviously pushed it the other way and said, no, I got to be there. So, I mean, can you talk about that?
Actually, I don't feel like talking about that. He's a man of many words. I don't feel like talking about it.
That's aged well, isn't it? Dana White sticking up for Mark Hunt? Well, blimey.
Yeah, I was offered $3 or $4 million to take a dive in a fight here in Australia, and I said, you know, are you serious?
Someone flat out asked you to take a dive for that much money, for $3-4 million.
Yeah, of course.
Either way, he was right. A man of few words says it all. I mean, who remembers this post-fight interview?
You seemed like you were more than willing to go to the ground with Stefan Struve here tonight.
Yeah.
Mark then just thanked his God, his wife and kids, and just walked off home, I reckon. I don't want to say Mark wanted to literally say as little as possible, but...
Could you have written a better script than this, defeating Kongo in the first round back here in Saitama?
No.
I mean, it basically became a meme in the community. There's a big part of this as well where I think Mark was just genuinely uncomfortable in front of the camera early on. Maybe he needed to stay in that quiet killer mode though to score all those big knockouts in his career, but I guess we'll never know. Number 3, Fedor Emelianenko. Yeah, okay, so on this list of stoic knockout artists, there is one man who stands above them all as the most cold-faced of the bunch. When you heard people called him the last emperor, I mean, it almost came off as mythical. And then he became a superstar in Pride and eventually across the world. And American audiences pretty much never saw or heard from Fedor without a translator by his side. And on the rare occasion he did crack a smile, you were never going to get more than that out of him. But it wasn't just that he couldn't speak English. Despite fighting for nearly 20 years, he also never really made any effort to learn the language either, which is totally fine, but not really going to help in any way with self-promotion. But like most people on this list, it didn't really affect his popularity or ability to sell. If anything, it only added to Fedor's mystique. He was a stoic enigma, and that only made him more scary. Fedor was just in no way a guy who was going to speak about anything other than the fight. Aside from being extremely respectful as a martial artist, the man was also highly religious and as hard as the cliffs of Dover.
Well, I have a very smooth attitude, so that's...
Smooth attitude? Like doesn't bother him?
То есть вас это никак не беспокоит?
Not at all?
Number 2, Robbie Lawler. For as much fun as the ruthless one Robbie Lawler appears to be having in the cage sometimes, it's been pretty evident that a lot of what it takes to be an MMA fighter these days he just wasn't interested in. You know, you'd be hard-pressed to find another guy who looked like he gave less of a shit during some press conferences and behind-the-scenes interviews, and honestly, good luck trying to find Robbie Lawler doing anything outside of the UFC bubble to promote a fight or even himself. He's always been a reserved and actually a pretty soft-spoken guy. Fighting is intense as fuck, especially the way he does it, but he keeps everything outside the cage about as calm as still water.
Because if I hurt him, I wasn't taking his neck.
What were you gonna take?
His soul.
Don't take his soul and get his soul out.
He's talked about being that guy that stays humble and just works hard, but at UFC 189, he was even vocally thankful that McGregor and Aldo had done such a good job of promoting the fight that he didn't have to do anything.
We know how much you love the media and the attention. Are you kind of happy that those two are taking the attention away from you?
I'm happy to be involved in this, but yeah, I'm not about the hype, I'm not about the exposure, I'm just here to fight.
What's the worst part about being an MMA fighter? Is it the constant beatings or the press tour?
Press tour for sure.
Which, at this point, in case you didn't realise, is something Robbie cannot be asked with. His entire Strikeforce era, every interview went through a cheese grater with a seemingly more and more disinterested Lawler, often at times just looking pretty vacant.
You are now going to be facing Jake Shields in the main event of the next Strikeforce card. Were you surprised at all that that was the matchup they presented to you?
I wasn't too worried about it. I'm ready to fight, so...
He didn't say much during basic MMA interviews, let alone anything to post on social media, appear on a commercial, even just call someone out. But it didn't matter, because that man is quite literally a gladiator reborn, and we love the ruthless Robbie Lawler. Number 1, Nick Diaz. Quite literally perhaps the MMA hero that never really wanted to be one. Nick Diaz became and is still a cultural icon inside the sport. He drew millions of fans to himself by simply being himself, refusing to compromise, to change his personality, to be led by the carrot on the stick and bend to the promotional requirements of whatever banner he was competing under. And Nick did it all and became a star while essentially trying his best to avoid promotion of any kind.
You know, I don't have a job now. This is what I do. I fight, you know, and if I don't get paid fighting, then you know, or if I don't get this done fighting, then I'm pretty shit out of luck. So I'm gonna have to do it right.
When I first started mixed martial arts, you know, this is all I could do. And so I even said it in after fight interviews or something. You know, this is all I know how to do. That's all I'm good at. So that's what I do. You know, you don't show up at this thing and you're not fighting, so you have to do this, you have to do that, or they're gonna, you know, this is in the contract. But nobody, you know, I might as well read my own contract. When I start training for a fight, nothing's easy about it, and all I care about is training and fight. It's not my job to let people know like who I am or how I am, or you know, I felt like my job is to go out there and put on a good show. As far as, you know, it's all the same to me, really. Popularity, I see the same people. I hang out with my same friends a lot of the time that I have for the last, you know. I just keep it real.
Always using me as the drawer. Always using me as the bad guy to get, you know, bring seats in, put me as a main event. I've been probably more main events than most people. I don't know, you know, I was back when I was a kid too, I was main eventing shows.
Now, unless you count posting videos, smoking joints and doing nunchucks for 20 minutes as self-promotion, you only have to look at Nick's face during any media day, press conference, anything to know that he was genuinely uncomfortable in most of these situations. Social anxiety comes in all forms, but there was nothing about Nick's standoffish nature that was an act.
No, it's a little weird. Just feels like the next fight, really.
I mean, that is a guy who just doesn't want to be there, and Nick told us enough. He hates doing media, hates interviews, or speaking about himself. He missed a UFC title shot because he refused to show up for a press conference. It wasn't just doing the media, though. Nick didn't like the way some of the questions were even phrased sometimes.
Have you paid attention or heard what Georgia said about your fight, that he's hoping and praying that you win every day?
Yeah, you know, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. To me, that's crazy. I'm not over here trying to act crazy. You know, I'm straight up, bro. You look at me, you know, look into my eyes, you know what I'm saying? I'm not playing no games. You know what I mean? Where I come from, that's crazy.
And whether it's just him being humble or part of his anxiety, but he'll never want to talk about himself, only really his teammates.
You know, I don't mind coming out and promoting my team, talking about my team, talking about my brother, and you know, talk about how great everybody is and how
how good everybody's doing.
And of course, you can't really talk about Nick without mentioning his brother, Nate, who definitely went through his own struggles with media, walking out of interviews just because he could not be bothered to answer the same questions over and over.
Oh, sorry, one more time? All right, he's done.
But Nate actually turned into a great self-promoter as he started to enjoy the spotlight even more.
He's shooting for a takedown, and I'm like, oh, you're a wrestler.
Nick always seemed like a guy who was constantly trying to get out of the spotlight, scurrying away from the flashlight held up by reporters and media, trying to get the full story. This ain't a game for Nick. It's as real as it gets, kill or be killed, and it's that mentality, along with his fight style, that only endeared him to fans even further. All right, there you go. There's 10 superstars right there who barely did anything to promote themselves, all right? You didn't think they exist? Well, they damn well do, all right? You just got to be exciting enough as a fighter, you know? Simple. As always, we want to say thank you to our MMA Point Hall of Famers. Thank you for going the extra mile to support the channel. You can join them, guys, for just $7.99 a month to get access to all the stuff we have on the memberships program, unedited podcasts, writers' meetings, access, behind-the-scenes interviews. It's all on there. Link is down below, or click the button to join. Find out more. Plenty of stuff for you Hall of Famers. Thank you once again, guys.